The silence in Blackwood Ridge wasn't empty, it was heavy. It possessed a physical weight, a dense, pressurized gelatin that braced against the tympanic membrane and refused to pop.
I checked the levels on the Tascam DR100 MK3 for the fourth time in 10 minutes. The needle hovered at negative infinity, dead air, absolute zero. Even the wind seemed to die before it reached the valley floor, strangled by the canopy of twisting rhododendrons that choked the sunlight out of the hollow. "Come on," I whispered, the sound of my own voice startlingly loud in the damp air. "Give me something. Give me a floorboard creak. Give me a cricket. Anything." "My name is Elias Thorne, and I am a thief. I don't steal wallets or jewelry, I steal ghosts. Technically, I'm an acoustic archaeologist. I locate spaces where history has bled out, massacres, collapses, ritual suicides, and I record the residual sonic imprint. I sell the files to high-end sound libraries for horror films, or to eccentric collectors in Zurich who get off on listening to the ambient noise of a death row cell. It's a ghoulish living, but it pays for the divorce lawyers, and it pays for the gear. And the gear was the only thing I loved anymore. I adjusted the strap of the heavy equipment bag digging into my shoulder. The hike to the old Coda church had taken 3 hours longer than the map suggested. The Appalachian terrain here didn't feel like geology, it felt like anatomy. The ridges were like bruised knuckles, the ravines like open throats. The locals in the town of Oakhaven, 10 miles back, had stopped making eye contact when I mentioned Coda. The gas station attendant had simply spit on the gravel and turned up the volume on his radio to drown out my question. "Don't go listening to things that ain't talking to you," an old woman on a porch had warned me as I drove past. I ignored her. I always ignored them. Superstition was just unorganized data. I was here for the data. The legend of Coda was specific and tantalizing. In 1948, the Church of the Earthen Vessel, a splinter sect of primitive Baptists mixed with coal country occultism, had sealed themselves inside a mine shaft directly beneath their floorboards. They weren't hiding from the law, they were conducting a ritual. They believed that God didn't live in the sky. They believed he was buried, trapped in the carbon, and that the only way to free him was through a perfect harmony. They sang for 72 hours straight. Then the shaft collapsed. No bodies were found, but every few years, hikers reported humming, a vibration that made their teeth ache. I crested the final ridge and saw it. The church sat in a bowl of dead grass, a small white clapboard structure that looked like a dropped toy. It was leaning aggressively to the left, the foundation buckling under 70 years of neglect. The windows were gone, looking like gouged out eyes, and the steeple had snapped off, lying in the weeds like a severed finger. But it was the ground that made me pause. Surrounding the church for a radius of maybe 50 yards, the earth was wrong. The grass wasn't just dead, it was gray, brittle, and arranged in swirling patterns like iron filings influenced by a magnet. I checked my watch, 4:45 p.m. I had maybe 2 hours of light left. "All right, Elias, pure prophet, let's set the stage," I muttered, sliding down the embankment. I moved with the practiced efficiency of a crime scene technician. I wasn't just setting up a microphone, I was building a net. I placed 4 geophones, sensors used to detect earthquakes, at the cardinal points of the church's perimeter. These would pick up vibrations traveling through the rock. Then I set up the centerpiece, a Neumann KU-100 dummy head microphone. It looked like a mannequin's severed head, gray and faceless, with high-fidelity microphones inside the rubber ears to capture 3D binaural sound. I placed the dummy head right at the front door of the rotting church. "Hear what they hear," I whispered to the plastic head. I retreated 20 feet back to a flat rock where I set up my laptop and preamps. I plugged in the XLR cables, watching the waveforms appear on my screen. Flat lines. I put on my headphones, Sony MD7506s, the industry standard. I closed my eyes and turned the gain up. Hiss, the noise floor of the equipment. Crack, a twig snapping somewhere in the woods. Thump, my own heartbeat amplified by the tension. And then I saw it before I heard it. On the laptop screen, the waveform for channel 3, the geophone buried near the altar, spiked. It wasn't a jagged spike of impact. It was a smooth sine wave undulation, a pure tone. I frowned, tweaking the frequency knob. Ground loop, interference, I muttered. I checked the cables. Everything was shielded. There were no power lines for 20 miles. This wasn't electrical interference. I isolated channel 3 in my headphones.
At first, it sounded like wind blowing over the lip of a bottle. Low, resonant. But as I boosted the mid-range frequencies, the texture changed. It wasn't air, it was friction. It sounded like stone grinding against stone, but rhythmically. Grind, pause, grind, pause. It was breathing. The mountain was breathing. A thrill, cold and electric, shot down my spine. This was it. This was the bloop, the hum, the kind of anomaly that Discovery Channel would pay 6 figures to license. I felt the familiar rush of greed, not for money, but for ownership. I was the first. I was the discoverer. "Keep going," I whispered to the dirt. "Talk to me." As the sun began to dip behind the jagged tree line, casting long, bruised shadows across the clearing, the temperature plummeted. It didn't cool down. The heat simply vanished, replaced by a stagnant chill that smelled of wet copper and stale lilies. I poured a cup of coffee from my thermos, my eyes glued to the screen. The rhythmic grinding on channel 3 was getting louder, and now channel 1, the dummy head at the door, was picking up something too. I leaned in, pressing the headphone cups tighter against my skull. It was a voice, or what used to be a voice. It was sibilant, dry, like dry leaves skittering across pavement. It was coming from inside the church. Open. I froze. The word was faint, buried under layers of static, but it was distinct. I hit the mark button on the recording software. Timestamp 1802, possible vocalization, source interior. I looked up at the church. The doorway gaped, a black rectangle of absolute darkness. I should have stayed at the station. Standard protocol for acoustic anomalies was to record from a distance, but the arrogance of the hunter took over. The audio was good, but it wasn't clean. I needed to be closer. I grabbed a handheld shotgun mic and a portable recorder, leaving the main rig running. I stood up, my knees popping. The silence of the clearing felt different now. It felt attentive. The trees seemed to be leaning inward, a stadium of silent spectators waiting for the main event. I walked toward the church. Every step I took crunched loudly on the gray, dead grass. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Inside my headphones, which were monitoring the shotgun mic, the sound was magnified. But as I crossed the threshold of the 50-yard dead zone, a new sound bled into the mix. A hum. It wasn't coming from the church. It was coming from the soles of my boots, a vibration so subtle it made my teeth itch. Hum, hum. It was a B-flat, a perfect, unwavering B-flat. I stopped 10 feet from the church steps. The dummy head sat there on its tripod, facing the darkness, looking like an execution victim waiting for the blow. "Is anyone there?" I called out. My voice didn't echo. The air swallowed it instantly. But the response was immediate. From beneath the church, not inside it, beneath it, a sound rose. It wasn't a word, it was a chord, a major triad, swelling up from the soil, passing through the rotting floorboards and vibrating the air around me. It was beautiful, horrifyingly, achingly beautiful. It sounded like a choir of 100 men humming with their mouths closed, their chests pressed against the bedrock. I stared at the recorder in my hand. The levels were redlining. "This is impossible," I whispered. "Physics doesn't work like this. Soil dampens high frequencies. It sounds like you're in the room with me." The chord shifted. It modulated from a major to a minor key. The mood of the air shifted with it, becoming heavy, sorrowful. And then the singing started. It wasn't English. It wasn't Latin. It was a rhythmic, guttural chanting that utilized phonemes I didn't think the human throat could produce. Clicking, grinding, whistling sounds interlocked with the deep tectonic bass of the humming. Kla, tu, ver, aros. I was mesmerized. I was witnessing the acoustic event of the century. I stepped closer, up the rotting steps, my microphone pointed like a weapon into the dark throat of the church.
Louder, I whispered, consumed by the desire for the perfect track. Give me more. I didn't notice that the geophones I had planted was sinking. I didn't notice that the gray grass behind me was standing up straight like hackles on a dog. I didn't notice that the sun had completely vanished and the only light now came from the faint, sickly bioluminescence of fungi activating on the rotting wood of the church pews. I stepped inside the sanctuary. The smell hit me first, ozone and petrichor mixed with something sweet like rotting honey. The floorboards groaned under my weight. The singing stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was violent. It sucked the air out of my lungs. Then a single voice spoke. It came from everywhere and nowhere. It sounded like it was originating from inside my own inner ear. The interval is wrong. I spun around, flashlight cutting through the gloom. Who's there? Show yourself. The interval, the voice repeated, sounding frustrated like a music teacher correcting a slow student. You are out of tune, Elias. My heart hammered against my ribs. How do you know my name? We know the frequency of your bone marrow, the voice whispered. We have been listening to your footsteps since you crossed the ridge. You walk in a dissonant rhythm. You disturb the composition. I backed away, aiming the flashlight at the floor. I'm leaving. I'm taking the gear and I'm leaving. Leaving? A laugh echoed, dry and rattling. You cannot leave the measure until the song is resolved. That is the rule of the composition. I turned to run, but the door, the open door I had just walked through, was gone. It wasn't locked, it wasn't boarded up, it was simply gone. Where the doorframe had been, there was now solid, seamless white clapboard, indistinguishable from the rest of the wall. I ran to it, slamming my fist against the wood. It was solid, cold, and it was vibrating. Hum. The floorboards beneath me began to tremble. Dust rose in plumes, dancing in the beam of my flashlight. The pews, rotted and overturned, began to slide across the floor, scraping loudly. Scrap. They were arranging themselves. They were moving into rows, facing me. I backed up toward the altar, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. What do you want? I'm just an observer. I'm just recording. There are no observers, the voice boomed, deeper now, vibrating my chest cavity. Observation is participation. To hear is to inhale. To listen is to let us in. I fumbled with my recorder, trying to shut it off, suddenly terrified that the device was somehow feeding them, anchoring them. I jammed my thumb onto the power button. It wouldn't turn off. The screen was frozen, the timer counting up. 1845, 1846. But the audio waveform on the screen wasn't showing the chaotic noise of the moving cues.
It was showing a structured, geometric pattern, a perfect spiral. The floor beneath the altar gave a sickening lurch. I scrambled back, climbing on the raised platform where the preacher would have stood. The wood was slick, coated in a thick, translucent slime that hadn't been there a moment ago. "Sing," the voice commanded. "No," I croaked. "Sing, Elias. Correct the dissonance. The shaft is hungry for the final note." "I don't know the song," I screamed, the panic finally breaking my professional veneer. "You will learn," the voice whispered. "The mountain learns everything eventually." From the center of the sanctuary floor, where the aisle used to be, the wood splintered. It didn't break downward, it exploded upward, as if something massive was pushing from below. A shape rose from the debris. It wasn't a monster, it wasn't a ghost, it was a pipe organ. But it wasn't made of metal and wood. The pipes were made of varying lengths of gray, calcified bone. Femurs, tibias, ribs, fused together with the same translucent slime. And the keys were fingers. Rows and rows of human fingers, fossilized and white, waiting to be pressed. The air in the room grew incredibly hot. The pressure built until my ears popped. Pop! The silence returned. I stood on the altar, trapped, staring at the bone organ. My flashlight beam wavered. Then the keys depressed themselves. A chord blasted forth, not sound but pure force. It hit me like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of me, driving me to my knees. It wasn't music, it was the sound of geology screaming. I covered my ears, but it didn't help. The sound was in my bones. Join us. The floorboards around the altar began to liquefy. The wood grain dissolved into a swirling brown vortex. I scrambled to find purchase, but my boots were sinking. "Help!" I screamed, a useless primal sound. "The harmony requires a tenor," the voice said, closer now. "You have a beautiful chest cavity, Elias. It will resonate wonderfully." I looked at my hand. The skin was vibrating so fast it looked blurred. I needed to think. I needed to get out. I looked at the wall where a window should have been. If the door was gone, maybe I could break through the siding. I grabbed the heavy metal shotgun mic, wielding it like a hammer. I lunged at the wall, swinging with all my strength. Crack! The wood splintered. Sunlight, impossibly bright for 6:30 p.m., poured through. I didn't hesitate. I threw myself at the hole, tearing my jacket, scraping my skin, desperate for the cool air of the outside. I fell through. I tumbled down the embankment, hitting the hard earth, rolling through the dead grass. I coughed, spitting out dirt, gasping for air. I was out. I was out. I scrambled to my feet, adrenaline surging. I grabbed my equipment bag, which I had dropped. Wait. I looked around. I wasn't outside. I was standing in the exact center of the church sanctuary. The hole I had smashed was gone. The wall was whole. The pews were arranged in a perfect circle around me, and sitting in the front row, staring at me with hollow wooden eyes, was the Neumann dummy head microphone I had left outside. It turned its head, slowly, the rubber neck twisting with a squeak of plastic against metal. It faced me, and then the plastic mouth of the dummy head opened, something it was not designed to do. It unhinged like a snake, and my own voice came out of it. "Take two," the dummy head said in my exact intonation. "Scene 1, the realization." I backed away, trembling. This isn't real. Hallucination, gas leak, methane from the mine. Methane doesn't have a time signature, my voice said from the dummy's mouth. I looked down at my hands. They were gray, the color of the dead grass outside. The veins were black. I touched my face. My skin felt hard, papery. "You didn't listen to the warning, Elias," the choir whispered from the floorboards. "You wanted to capture the sound. Now the sound has captured you." "Let me go!" I roared, grabbing the tripod and swinging it at the dummy head. The tripod passed right through it, like smoke. The dummy head laughed, a loop of my own laughter from a recording I made years ago at a dinner party. A happy, drunk laugh, recontextualized into madness. "We are at measure 40. The trap is set. The mouse is in the box. Now the box must be buried." The floor beneath me gave way completely. I fell. Not far, maybe 10 feet. I landed on something soft, wet. I clicked my flashlight on, my hands shaking so bad the beam strobe lighted the space. I was in the shaft, but it wasn't a mine shaft. It was a throat. The walls were lined not with coal, but with... I was in the throat. The beam of my flashlight cut through the suspended dust, illuminating the walls of the shaft. My brain tried to process the geological data: shale, sandstone, anthracite coal. But the pattern recognition software in my mind crashed. The walls were lined with velvet. No, not velvet. I reached out, my hand trembling uncontrollably, and touched the surface of the shaft wall. It was warm. It yielded under my finger, wet and spongy. It was covered in millions of tiny, hair-like cilia, swaying in a rhythmic breeze that was coming from below. The walls were lined with cilia, like the inside of a trachea. I jerked my hand back, wiping the slime onto my jeans, bile rising in my throat. The smell was overpowering now, a thick, cloying mixture of ozone, formaldehyde, and the sickly sweet scent of funeral lilies left too long in a vase. "Welcome to the foyer," the whisper circled me, traveling along the wet walls like a marble in a drainpipe. I scrambled backward, my boots slipping on the slick floor. Where am I? What is this? I grabbed my Tascam recorder. It was still running. The time code read 0000. It had reset. Okay, Elias, think. I muttered, my voice sounding dead and flat in the dampened space. "You fell. You're concussed. This is a hallucination brought on by head trauma and low oxygen. You are in a mine shaft. The walls are just covered in fungus. That's all. Rare subterranean fungus." I forced myself to stand. My body ached, but nothing felt broken. The shaft angled downward at a steep 45 degrees. Upward was a sheer, slick, vertical drop. I couldn't climb out. The only way was down, deeper into the gullet. I began to descend. Every step I took produced a wet squelch, a sound that seemed obscenely loud in the quiet. But it wasn't quiet. As I moved deeper, I began to hear the breathing again. It wasn't the wind, it was coming from the walls themselves. Inhale, exhale. The tunnel widened into a cavern that looked less like a cave and more like a stomach. And there, embedded in the walls, I found the congregation. I stopped, the flashlight beam shaking violently in my grip. They weren't bodies. They were part of the architecture. Dozens of human faces were pressed into the wet, living rock. Their skin had calcified, turning a translucent gray that matched the stone, but their features were perfectly preserved. Men in flat caps, women in bonnets, children with wide, terrified eyes. They weren't dead. Their eyes followed the light, and their mouths were stretched open, frozen in an eternal O, forming perfect acoustic resonators. I realized with a sick jolt of nausea that this wasn't just a tomb, it was soundproofing. They had been fused into the walls to create the perfect acoustic chamber. I raised the Tascam, the professional instinct overriding the primal terror. I have to record this. It was the fatal flaw of my life, the need to capture the tragedy rather than survive it. I hit the record button. Subject, the lost congregation of 1948. I whispered, the microphone near the face of a young woman merged with a vein of coal. They appear integrated, biological fusion with the carbon strata, potential parasitic organism, or... The woman's eyes snapped to mine. Her mouth didn't move, but a sound emitted from her throat, a pure, piercing sine wave, 440 hertz, concert A. Then the man next to her joined in, 554 hertz, C sharp. Then the child, 659 hertz, E. A perfect A major chord. It was loud, deafeningly loud. It hit me physically, vibrating the water in my cells, my vision blurred. "Do you like the tone, Elias?" The woman's voice projected into my mind, bypassing my ears entirely. I covered my ears, dropping to my knees. "Stop! Stop it!" "We cannot stop," the man grumbled, a tectonic bass. "The mountain demands the song. The song keeps the roof from falling. If we stop, the sky crashes down." The chord swelled, adding a seventh, adding a ninth, becoming complex and jazzy and utterly terrifying. "Why me?" I screamed over the wall of sound. "Why are you doing this?" The music cut out instantly. The silence that followed was sharper than a knife.
"Because you listen," the child whispered. "The others, the rescue teams, the hikers, they heard noise, they heard wind,
They ran away. But you recorded, you amplified, you gave us a stage. My blood ran cold. I just wanted the audio, I stammered. Vanity, the woman hissed. You steal screams and sell them. You bottle our purgatory and sell it for movie trailers. You are a parasite of sorrow, Elias, and the mountain loves a parasite. I scrambled up, backing away, deeper into the darkness. I had to get away from them, away from the judging eyes in the walls. I ran. The tunnel twisted, the floor becoming softer, more uneven. I tripped over something hard and metallic. I shined the light down. It was a wire recorder, an antique Webster Chicago model from the late 40s. It was rusted, fused to the floor, but the wire spool was still shiny, untouched by the rot. Next to it lay a skeletal hand, the bones polished and white, a gold wedding band hanging loosely on the finger groove. Silas Vance, the leader. I shouldn't have touched it. I knew the rules of horror films. I knew the rules of common sense. But I was Elias Thorne, and I was addicted to the signal. I reached out and spun the spool. There was no power, yet the speaker crackled to life. The friction of my finger was enough to excite the magnetic wire. Static, pop, hiss. Then a voice, rough, Appalachian, desperate. Day 3. The lamps are dead. The food is gone. But the song is working. The rock is getting soft. We can push our hands through it like mud. Sister Mary says she sees the light, but it ain't sunlight. It's underneath. I spun the spool faster. Day 5, we was wrong. Oh God, we was wrong. It ain't heaven. We didn't sing the door open. We sang the beast awake. It eats sound. It eats the silence. It wants us to be the pipes. I spun it to the end of the wire. It's coming. It sounds like a man with a machine, a man who listens. It says his name is Elias. I yanked my hand back as if the wire were red hot. Silas Vance had recorded that in 1948. He knew my name. Predestination paradox? I whispered, my voice shaking. No, that's sci-fi. This is something else. It is a loop. A voice boomed from the darkness ahead. I aimed my light forward. The tunnel ended, or rather, it opened up into a vast spherical chamber. The ceiling was lost in shadow. The floor was a lake of black, viscous liquid that rippled with the rhythm of a slow heartbeat. And in the center of the lake, rising from the black ooze, was a platform. On the platform stood a microphone stand. It wasn't a rusty antique. It was a brand new chrome stand, and sitting in the clip was my shotgun mic, the one I had lost. When? 5 minutes ago? Or 5 years ago? I looked down at my hands. They were empty. I checked my bag. The shotgun mic was gone. The soloist has arrived, the walls chanted. The liquid in the lake began to boil. Shapes rose from the deep, not people, structures. A mixing console made of black slate rose from the depths. Faders made of bone, monitors made of giant hollowed-out skulls. It was a control room, a studio built by hell. Take your place, Elias. The session is booked. The client is waiting. I'm not singing, I yelled, backing up against the wall of faces. I'm not joining your cult. The wall behind me pushed back. A pair of cold stone hands grabbed my shoulders.
You don't understand. The woman's face in the wall whispered into my ear, her stone lips brushing my lobe. You aren't joining the choir. The choir is the backing track. She bit my ear hard. I screamed, tearing away, blood running down my neck. You, she said, licking the blood from her stone lips. You are the producer. You are the one who captures the pain and makes it eternal. That is why the mountain called you. We fade, Elias. Our voices grow tired. We need a new medium. We need digital. My heart stopped. They didn't want my soul. They didn't want my body. They wanted my equipment, and they wanted me to operate it. I looked at the Tascam in my hand. The red light was blinking. It was recording everything, and as I watched, the file size grew. 2 GB, 4 GB, 10 GB. It was absorbing the mountain. If I destroy it, I whispered, holding the recorder up. If I smash this, you get nothing. The chamber went silent. The boiling lake froze. The faces in the wall went slack with fear. Do not, the bass voice rumbled. The archive must be preserved. Let me go, I threatened, my thumb hovering over the delete button. Let me out, or I wipe the drive. I wipe you all. It was a bluff. I didn't know if it would work, but for a moment, the horror paused. The leverage shifted. Then a sound came from the center of the black lake, a slow, sarcastic clapping. Clap, clap, clap. A figure rose from the mixing console. It was wearing a flannel shirt, hiking boots, and a tactical vest. It had a bag slung over its shoulder. It turned around. It was me. Not a dummy head, not a reflection. It was a physical, breathing copy of me. But its eyes were black voids, and its mouth was sewn shut with copper wire. It raised a hand and pointed at me. Then it pointed at the Tascam in my hand. I looked down at the screen. The file name wasn't Blackwood Session 1.wave. The file name was Elias Thorne Soul Transfer Complete.wave. The copy of me in the lake picked up a pair of headphones and put them on. It nodded, and suddenly I couldn't move my legs. I looked down. My boots weren't sinking into mud. My boots were turning into stone. The gray calcification was spreading up my ankles, rapid and cold, locking my joints,
fusing my denim to my skin. "No!" I screamed, smashing the Tascam against the wall. It didn't break. It bounced off the soft, fleshy wall with a dull thud. The Tascam landed face up. The red light was blinking in the darkness. Playback initiated, and then the sound began. It wasn't a song, it was a frequency, a high-pitched screech that felt like a drill boring into the base of my skull. The copy of me at the console gave a thumbs up. My knees locked. The stone reached my thighs. I was being archived. "You can't do this," I howled, clawing at my own legs, breaking my fingernails on the rock that used to be my flesh. "It is already done," the copy transmitted into my head. "We are just tracking the vocals now." The walls began to pulse. The faces opened their mouths wide, and they began to scream. But it wasn't a scream of pain. It was a scream of excitement. They were fans, and the show was just starting. The stone reached my hips, heavy and numbing, like standing in a bucket of rapidly curing concrete. I screamed, thrashing my upper body, but my legs were gone, not amputated, but translated. I was becoming geology. I was becoming the venue. "Cut the feed," I roared at the doppelganger standing at the console in the middle of the lake. "You want a producer? Fine, but I need my hands. I need to move." The creature, my dark mirror, tilted its head. The copper wire stitching its lips shut gleamed under the bioluminescent fungi. It didn't speak. It adjusted a fader on the slate console. Instantly, the pain in my legs vanished, or rather, the sensation of pain was replaced by the sensation of sustain. I could feel the vibration of the mountain traveling through my petrified shins, up into my living spine. I was grounded, literally. Input accepted, the copy transmitted. Mobility is irrelevant. You are the patch bay. The chamber shuddered. From the ceiling, stalactites began to descend, but they weren't stone formations. They were cables, thick, black XLR cables, dropping like vines from a jungle canopy. They slithered through the air, seeking connections. One snake-like cable hovered near my face. The connector at the end wasn't standard metal pins. It was a syringe, 3 needles arranged in a triangular pattern, left, right, ground. I swatted it away. "Get away from me!" Another cable dropped behind me, coiling around my neck, cold and slick. "We need to verify the signal path," the faces in the wall chanted in unison, their voices phasing in and out like a bad radio signal. "Plug in, Elias, plug in." The cable at my neck tightened. The needle-tipped connector swung closer to the base of my skull. "This isn't happening," I gibbered, hyperventilating. "I'm lying in a ditch somewhere with a broken leg." Denial is a low-pass filter. It muffles the truth. Open up the high end. The cable struck. Thwack. It didn't go into my skull. It plugged into the C7 vertebrae at the base of my neck. I expected pain. There was none. Instead, there was clarity. My vision exploded into white noise, then reassembled. I wasn't just seeing the cave anymore. I was seeing sound. I could see the waveforms of the water rippling in the lake, blue oscillating lines. I could see the heat signature of the copy, red distorted static, and I could hear everything. I could hear the worms moving through the dirt 3 miles above us. I could hear the highway traffic on Route 19, 40 miles away. I could hear the heartbeats of the deer in the forest. I was connected to the mountain's nervous system. Check 1, the copy broadcasted. The sound boomed inside my brain, rattling my teeth. Check 2, sibilance. S. My mouth opened against my will. S. I repeated. My voice was amplified, booming through the cavern like the voice of a god. "What did you do to me?" I boomed. "We removed the latency," the copy replied, its hands flying over the bone faders. "You were lagging, Elias. Human reaction time is 200 milliseconds, too slow for the symphony. Now you are zero latency. You are real time." The terror was absolute, but so was the rush. As a sound engineer, I had spent my life chasing the perfect signal chain, and now I was the signal chain. I felt the audio flowing through me, clean, powerful, infinite. For a second, just a split second, I admired it, and that was the trap. "He likes it," the child in the wall whispered. "He likes the fidelity." "Of course he does. He is a collector, and now he is the collection." I shook my head, fighting the euphoria. "No, I am Elias Thorne. I have a life. I have... I tried to remember my wife's face. Static. I tried to remember the name of my dog. White noise. I tried to remember why I needed money.
Silence. The memories were being overwritten. The hard drive of my brain was being reformatted for audio storage. "Stop deleting me!" I screamed, the volume shaking dust from the ceiling. "We are not deleting," the copy said soothingly. "We are mastering, removing the noise. Memories are just noise, Elias. Who needs a childhood when you can have a perfect reverb tail?" The stone crept up to my ribs. My chest felt heavy, encased in armor.
I could barely inhale, but I didn't need to. The cable in my neck was feeding me oxygenated blood, or something like it. "I need to leave," I gasped. "The recording! I have to deliver the recording!" "To whom?" the copy asked. "To the library, to the client." The copy paused. It looked at the faces in the wall. The faces grinned. "We are the client," the copy said, "and we have accepted the delivery." The copy reached under the console and pulled out something. It was my bag, my equipment bag. It unzipped it and pulled out a stack of hard drives, my archives, 10 years of work, recordings of murders, suicides, ghost hunts, war zones, my life's work. "You brought us snacks," the copy said. It took one of the hard drives, the one labeled Asylum Scream 2018, and brought it to its sewn-shut mouth. It bit into the metal casing. Crunch! Sparks flew. The copy chewed, swallowing the plastic and metal. And then the sound of the asylum screams filled the cavern, not from speakers, from the copy's throat. It was regurgitating the audio, amplifying it, twisting it. The screams merged with the choir in the walls. The agony of the patients I had recorded years ago was now part of the mountain song. "Delicious," the copy said, wiping black oil from its chin. "High bit rate, very crisp." It picked up another drive. Car crash intersection 2021. Crunch. The sound of screeching tires and shattering glass echoed, looping rhythmically, turning a tragedy into a percussive beat. I watched in horror as my legacy was consumed. I had spent my life documenting horror, thinking I was preserving history. I wasn't. I was just gathering ingredients for this thing. "You're eating my life," I wept. The stone was at my armpits now. My arms were still free, flailing uselessly. "We are integrating it," the copy corrected. "You kept these sounds trapped in plastic boxes. We are setting them free. Listen to them, Elias. They are happy here." The copy pointed to the ceiling. I looked up. The darkness above was shifting. I saw shapes moving, the ghosts of the sounds I had stolen, the crying woman from the abandoned hotel, the dying soldier from the battlefield recording. They were floating in the ether, their mouths open, singing in harmony with the miners. They weren't suffering anymore. They were resonant. And that was the most terrifying part. It started to make sense. It started to feel right. Why keep pain hidden on a shelf? Why not let it sing? "It's beautiful," I whispered. The trap snapped shut. My left arm turned to stone instantly. Snap. Frozen in a gesture of reaching out. "He understands," the faces chanted. "He is ready for the final mix." The copy at the console turned a large knob labeled Master Output. The vibrations increased. The lake boiled violently. The copy began to dissolve, melting back into the black ooze, its job done. "Wait!" I yelled. Where are you going? I am just the interface. The copy's voice faded. You are the hardware now, Elias. You have to keep the levels steady for eternity. The copy was gone. The console remained floating in the lake, and I realized with a sinking final dread that the console was moving towards me. Or I was moving towards it. The stone encasing my body was merging with the floor, sliding me forward. I was being installed. I wasn't going to be a statue. I was going to be the desk. No, please, I begged, but my voice was auto-tuned now. Perfect pitch, zero emotion. I don't want to be the equipment. The slate console slammed into my petrified chest. My flesh fused with the faders. My right hand, still flesh, was forced onto the master volume knob. A new cable shot down from the ceiling and plugged into my right temple. Data upload initiated. I saw the playlist. It wasn't just my recordings. It was every sound ever made in this valley. Every scream of a hawk, every cry of a lost hiker, every crack of a breaking branch. Millions of tracks, and I had to mix them all. Keep the balance, Elias, Silas Vance's voice whispered from inside the machine that was now my body. If the levels drop, the mountain wakes up, and if the mountain wakes up, it walks. I felt the burden. It was heavier than the rock, the responsibility of the noise. I had to keep the horror harmonious. I had to make the suffering sound good. If I stopped, the discordance would shatter the earth. My right hand, the only part of me that could still move, gripped the knob. I checked the levels. Channel 4 was peaking, a fox dying in a trap. I lowered the fader with my mind. Channel 89 was too quiet, a miner gasping for air. I boosted the mids. I was working. I was doing my job. And then I heard a new sound. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Footsteps. Up above, on the surface. I focused my attention, projecting my consciousness up the 3 miles of rock, through the cable in my neck. I saw him, a young man, a YouTuber with a GoPro strapped to his head and a cheap spectral analyzer in his hand. He was standing in the dead grass outside the church. "Hey guys," the YouTuber whispered into his camera. "So we're at the Coda Church. Rumor has it a sound guy disappeared here a few years ago. We're going to see if we can catch an EVP." He placed a digital recorder on the church steps, right above my head. My heart, or what was left of it, fluttered. A new source, new material. I needed it. I craved it. The mix was getting stale. I needed a fresh voice to brighten the high end. I looked at the faces in the wall. They were smiling. "Invite him in, Elias," they sang. "Send him the hook." I didn't want to. I wanted to warn him. I wanted to scream, "Run! Get away!" But my hand moved on its own. It adjusted the EQ. It added a little reverb to the wind. It synthesized a whisper from the ambient noise. I made the wind sound like a name. Tyler. Up on the surface, the YouTuber froze. "Did you guys hear that? It sounded like my name." He stepped closer to the church. I felt a surge of dopamine. The signal was clean. The connection was made. I wasn't Elias Thorne, the victim. I was Elias Thorne, the producer, and I had a schedule to keep. My right hand, the one fused to the master knob, twitched. I felt a surge of professional anxiety. The wind up there was too gusty. It would mud up the mix. I needed to isolate the subject. Close the door, I thought. 3 miles above, the heavy oak door of the Coda Church, which Tyler had just propped open with a rock, slammed shut. Bam! The transient spike on my mental monitor was crisp, a perfect hard knee compression. I saw Tyler through the vibrations of the floorboards. He jumped, spinning around, his GoPro light frantically sweeping the empty pews. "Hello?" Tyler yelled. "Is someone there? That door just slammed on its own." His voice came down the rock layers, filtered through the limestone. It hit my auditory cortex. I analyzed it instantly. Analysis: male, mid-20s, trembling, pitch elevated due to adrenaline. Good resonance in the 2 kilohertz range. Usable. I looked at the faces in the wall of the cavern, the choir. They were watching me, their stone eyes wide with anticipation. They were the audience. I was the DJ. "Drop the bass, Elias," the woman in the wall whispered. "Give him the fear frequency." I focused on the fader labeled sub-bass. I pushed it up with my mind. The mountain groaned. It wasn't an earthquake. It was a generated tone. 18.9 hertz, the ghost frequency. Just below human hearing, but resonant with the human eyeball. It causes hallucinations, dread, and nausea. Up in the church, Tyler grabbed a pew for support. He gagged. "Whoa, okay, getting dizzy. Serious EMF spike, guys. I feel like I'm being watched." "You are being watched, Tyler. You're being tracked." I adjusted the EQ. I rolled off the high end of the room tone, making the church sound smaller, more claustrophobic. "The air just got heavy," Tyler whispered into his camera. "It's like the room is shrinking." I felt a cold thrill. This was power. I wasn't just recording the haunting anymore. I was scoring it. I was directing the scene. I knew exactly when to introduce the creak, exactly when to silence the crickets. I was an artist. "He is ripe," the copy of Silas whispered from the deep. "Harvest him." "Not yet," I projected back. "The tension isn't high enough. The release won't be satisfactory. We need more build-up." I was prolonging his terror, not for sadism, or so I told myself, but for quality. A scream is just a scream, but a scream born from 5 minutes of absolute crushing dread, that is a symphony. I triggered a sample. I pulled a file from the archive, a recording of a crying baby I had captured in an abandoned hospital in Detroit. I routed it to the left surround output. "Wah, wah!" Tyler whipped his head around. "Did you hear that? A baby? There's a baby in here?" He moved toward the sound. I panned the sound to the right surround. "Wah, wah!" "No, it's over there now," Tyler panted. He was sweating. I could hear the saline dripping onto the floorboards. Plip, plip. I added a delay effect to the drips, making them sound like footsteps. He was terrified. He was perfect. "Please," Tyler yelled, his voice cracking. "I'm just filming. I'm leaving." He ran for the door. He grabbed the handle. It was locked. Of course it was locked. I had engaged the gate plug-in on the exit. Nothing gets out below a certain threshold. He rattled the handle. Clack, clack, a frantic percussive rhythm. "Let me out!" "Now," the choir urged, the crescendo. I looked at the console embedded in my chest. My stone body hummed with energy. I was ready for the solo. I engaged the talkback mic. This allowed me to project my voice directly into the room upstairs. "Tyler," I spoke.
My voice wasn't just my voice anymore. It was layered with the voices of the 100 souls in the wall. It sounded like a legion. Tyler froze. He turned slowly to face the center of the church. "Who are you?" "I am the engineer," I boomed, "and we are doing a sound check." "Sound check?" he whimpered. "Yes, we need to test your dynamic range. Please, scream." "What?" "Scream," I roared.
pushing the master fader to +10 decibels. The church shook, the windows blew out, not outward but inward, the glass imploding into dust. Tyler didn't scream, he gasped. He was choking on the fear. Disappointing, I muttered. He's choking. I need to clear his throat. I activated the floor trap sequence. Beneath Tyler's feet, the floorboards of the church aisle dissolved. He didn't fall into a hole. He fell into a slide, a slick, fleshy tube that spiraled down through the crust, bypassing the foyer, delivering him straight to the studio. He slid down the dark chute, screaming the whole way. Ah! Ah, there it is, I whispered. I hit record. The red light in my mind burned bright. Tyler tumbled out of the ceiling of the cavern and splashed into the black lake. He surfaced, thrashing in the goo, spitting out the black bile. He looked up. He saw the walls lined with faces. He saw the bone organ, and then he saw me, a man made of rock, fused into a slate desk, half submerged in the lake, with cables running into his skull, and a human hand hovering over a volume knob. Oh my God, what are you? I didn't answer verbally. I didn't have to.
I reached out with my mind and grabbed the input cable, the one with the syringe tip. It lowered from the ceiling, hovering over Tyler's neck. Please, no! I have 500,000 subscribers. People will look for me. They will listen to you, I corrected him. For the first time, they will truly listen. The cable struck. Tyler stiffened. His eyes rolled back. His scream cut off, transformed into a digital signal. I watched the waveform on my internal monitor. It was a beautiful, complex shape, jagged peaks of terror, smooth valleys of resignation. I routed his signal to channel 2. The faces in the wall began to hum a backing track, a low, mournful D minor. I brought Tyler's fader up. His voice came out of the cavern walls, amplified, looped, pitch shifted. Please, no, please, no. It was rhythmic. It was catchy. I started mixing. I added some reverb to his plea. I compressed his sobbing to make it punchier. I harmonized his begging with the miner's chant. It was a masterpiece. Tyler wasn't swimming anymore. He was sinking. His skin was turning gray. The carbon was taking him. He was becoming a plug-in, a permanent fixture in the rack. He stopped struggling. He started singing. He harmonized with himself, a high tenor line that soared above the bass. I closed my eyes, my stone eyelids scraping shut, and just listened.
It was the most beautiful thing I had ever heard, and that was the moment the horror truly settled in. I wasn't looking for a way out. I checked my internal clock, session time, infinity. I felt a twinge of hunger, not for food, for more tracks. That needs a bridge, I muttered to myself. We need a female vocal for the bridge. I reached out with my mind, scanning the surface. I felt the vibrations of a car engine, a sheriff's deputy, coming to check on the abandoned car at the trailhead. The faces in the wall grinned. "New talent," they whispered. "Get the contract ready," I said, my voice void of any human empathy, smooth as polished vinyl. "I'll set the stage." I reached for the fader labeled Siren. I was Elias Thorne. I came to record the dead, but the dead were boring. The dying had so much more texture. I turned the master knob up. The mountain opened its mouth and began to sing.
The mountain never stopped singing. If you heard the hum, you are already part of the choir. Subscribe and hit the bell to lock in your next nightmare. We upload fresh terror every week. Comment, "I hear it," if you stayed till the end. Sleep tight or don't sleep at all.